is a special presentation of KEZI 9 News, the Fire Watch forecast, preparing you for the fire season.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We have the special presentation planned for you tonight on the special edition of KEZI 9 News. I'm meteorologist Holden LeCroy.
And I'm meteorologist Cameron Landfield.
And tonight we are going to explore new challenges and benefits ahead of this fire season. And we'll also have a complete Stormtracker 9 forecast on what we can expect for the challenging areas across our state. But first, we want to take a look at where we stand across the state right now. The big difference from this past fire season is the elimination of drought in Oregon, the first time that's happened since 2019.
The leading factors that determine how a summer is going to go in Oregon is water, drought, and snowpack. And this season is a bit different than previous years, finally bringing a sense of normalcy.
You know, it's always nice when you have fairly normal conditions going into a warm season.
Normal being above average snowpack that is stuck around through early June, thanks to cloudy, cooler weather, but also a quicker, and this is very important, late season melt-off. According to Spencer Higginson, hydrologist with the National Weather Service in Medford, this provides more ground and surface water, rather than loss of water from sublimation, which skips the liquid phase during a slow melt-off and can actually result in loss of water as a whole. Combination of a rainy, cooler winter and a late-season snowpack has been a blessing for this state, resulting in the first elimination of drought since November of 2019. All this moisture has increased soil moisture content, filled reservoirs, and put us in a great position going into the summer. But that can change in the blink of an eye.
I feel pretty good about the next month or so being fairly typical, but as you go further on, you just don't know.
A hot and prolonged dry stretch could snap us back to square one, drying out the soil and bringing back drought.
Things can change quickly, obviously. If you have a really warm June and July, we could have drought by August or something like that, but right now we seem to be in a fairly good position.
As far as effects on fire season, grasses always dry out first, and we've already seen effects of this, and that'll continue to be a hazard all summer long. But full-fledged major forest fires will likely be very, very late this season, just due to how wet the forest floor is and how wet the trees are.
Now, while the drought was eliminated and snowpack was rejuvenated, some new challenges could be added to the equation this season. January's ice storm could add new dangers to fire season this year. The storm brought down a lot of vegetation across Lane County that is now just sitting around, ready to be turned into fuel. Now, meteorologist Cameron Landfield looked at some of those hazards as we transition into the season.
This year's ice storm was obviously pretty devastating on the community. Whether it was injuries from slipping or the power outages and property damage, it had a lot of effects. And as we move into the summer, you'd think that we'd be able to forget about that and move on. But with wildfire season coming in, unfortunately, that's not entirely possible. So I'm out here on Moon Mountain, where a lot of the debris from the ice storm is still very visible. All over the sides of the trail, you can see debris of all shapes and sizes, and everything here, all around this trail, is fuel for a wildfire. That's one of the main components that you need for a wildfire. And to see a mess like this so close to an active community, Lane Community College is just right up the street, is a bit concerning. If something like this were to go up, we would have some serious consequences. So I sort of generically said shapes and sizes earlier when I was talking about the debris everywhere. And you can actually get a lot more in depth with that. Now, that means I need to bring up fuel moisture content, which is a quantity that we use to determine how safe an area is based on how dry the fuels around are. And there's live and dead fuels. Now, live fuels are all of these green living plants that you see around us, but dead fuels, that's everything that the ice storm brought down, and that's stuff like this, these dead fallen limbs. And then as far as dead fuels get, you can go even further into into the categorization, and that's going to be based on time lag. Now, time lag is how long it takes for a piece of debris to respond to the area around it and the changes in humidity, and all of that is based on the cross-section of pieces of individual debris. This is what you'd call a 10-hour fuel. Now, 10-hour fuels are between 1/4 and 1 inch, and it would take 10 hours for this to respond to the conditions around it. So it would take 10 hours of dry conditions to get this to dry out and be easy to ignite. These are, in general, pretty easy to ignite, and they end up being fantastic for spreading wildfires. Next, you get into the 100-hour fuel, and this is going to be between 1 and 3 inches of diameter. Now, these are harder to light, and of course, they take longer to respond to the outside conditions, but they burn a lot hotter and increase that wildfire intensity once they go up. Now, finally, you have the 1,000-hour fuels. So this would take roughly 42 days to either soak through or become completely dry. And much like the 100-hour fuels, these are very, very dangerous. Once they get burning, you have some of the most dangerous wildfire conditions you can get. So even though the prognosis for wildfire season looks a little bit better this year than last, there's still certainly some danger lurking in these more remote, not cleared out areas, which puts us at mercy of a storm that hit almost more than 4 months ago. Firefighters in our area rely on technology to stay prepared. It's an extra pair of eyes to detect smoke before wildfires get out of control. KEZI 9 News anchor Joey Vaca joins us live from the top of Skinner Butte in Eugene to explain how these cameras work and who's behind the operation. Joey?
Yeah, Cam, so this camera network is actually known as the Western Wildfire Camera Network because it serves more than just us here in Oregon. And like a number of different states that this camera network serves, it took a number of different groups to get it going. Comprised of cameras all across multiple Western states, and with help from UC San Diego and the University of Nevada, Reno, the UO's Oregon Hazards Lab has put together the largest public-facing wildfire camera system in the world. Doug Toomey with the Oregon Hazards Lab took me through how they work.
They look around in the 360. There's algorithms running on the camera to automatically detect fires. The cameras themselves are, during the day, visible, and you can see on the order of 20 to 40 miles on a clear day. At night, they go near infrared, and you can actually see much further.
Toomey says the cameras also play a role before a fire starts by looking at wet and dry fuels in certain areas. They also monitor weather conditions so that when a fire actually does start, crews can get a sense for things like how strong the wind is blowing or how dry a certain area is. And when I was looking into this, I actually spoke with a hotshot firefighter who used to fight fires here in Oregon, and she says she didn't have it when she was on the front lines, but it would have been a valuable resource. But either way, now that we have it now, it's going to save a lot of forest lands and a lot of homes. Send it back to you in the studio. Reporting live in Eugene, Joey Vaca, KEZI 9 News.
Thanks, Joey. It's so far so good when it comes to wildfire conditions, but experts say we're one good heat wave away from a much different outlook. How the Oregon Department of Forestry is preparing, next on the special edition of KEZI 9 News.
And I'll explain what dry thunderstorms are and how they have a major impact on fire starts across Oregon, next.
The Fire Watch forecast is sponsored by Keep Oregon Green.
Right now with Papa Murphy's, we've got a great deal.
Which means I make more great pizza.
It's not an I thing, Dad. It's a we thing.
Yeah, but I ordered it online. I did the taking. I did the baking.
There's no I in team, honey. There is an I in pizza.
This summer, get select thin crust pizzas for only $8.99. Papa Murphy's, we make great pizza, so you can make the pizza great.
Such a great deal.
$8.99 for a large pizza? That is a great deal.
Everyone deserves the fastest, most reliable internet speeds, regardless of where they live. That's why Spectrum offers the fastest speeds in more neighborhoods than any other provider. So switch to Spectrum and get a powerful network that connects nearly 500 million devices.
Switch to Spectrum Internet for only $49.99 a month with free modem, no data caps, and no contracts. Plus, save with our 2-year price guarantee when you level up to a gig. Call 1-855-735-1336 or scan to call.
With Spectrum Internet, you can power all of your devices to enjoy streaming, video chatting, and gaming with the most reliable internet speeds. Get a powerful network that millions of customers rely on. I rely on Spectrum Internet. You should too.
Switch to Spectrum Internet for only $49.99 a month with 99.9% network reliability, no added taxes or hidden fees, and no contracts. Plus, save with our 2-year price guarantee. Call 1-855-735-1336.
Call now.
This wildfire season, depend on KEZI 9 News Fire Watch coverage to keep your family safe, tracking fire dangers across Western Oregon, keeping you prepared with late-breaking updates on evacuations and closures, bringing you live breaking news coverage from the fire lines, and forecasting severe weather and dangerous air quality with Stormtracker 9, giving you real-time safety alerts and warnings on air and on the Fire Watch page at KEZI.com. Every day, depend on KEZI 9 News for live, local, late-breaking Fire Watch coverage.
Welcome back to a special presentation of KEZI 9 News, the Fire Watch forecast from the Stormtracker 9 weather team.
Welcome back. The Oregon Department of Forestry is a crucial organization in fighting and mitigating fires across Oregon. And while we're seeing wetter conditions so far this year, that could change in an instant.
To get a good grasp on fire season, sometimes it's better to just look as recently as last year.
So we're currently on the site of where the Moon Mountain fire burned last year, where it burned approximately 34 acres.
Moon Mountain fire in 2023 started at dry grass, which can be controlled, but if not, can quickly escalate a situation.
So currently, with the amount of rain and also the amount of sunshine that we've been getting, we're having situations like this where we have grasses growing nice and tall. However, the issue that happens is that once that grass gets nice and tall, it will dry out in the summer once the rain stops and the heat comes. And then that dry grass is just dry fuel.
Fuel that can lead up to homes, businesses, and families. So as we head into fire season, it's important to look close to home, no matter the conditions.
We want to make sure that people keep wildfire prevention at top of mind. As we move into the summer, it's very easy to start a fire in any situation, and sometimes people don't even know that they potentially did start a wildfire.
ODF is already staffing up, even if this season is a bit different compared to the scorching hot and dry conditions we were experiencing last year.
We go in prepared for kind of anything every season. I will say, yes, last year we were experiencing very different conditions. The Moon Mountain fire, for example, started in early July.
The wetter and cooler conditions may be a peace of mind for now, but just one significant heat wave could take us back to square one. We've already seen conditions take a turn from just one dry and hot week back at the start of June. So just because the season is good for now, doesn't mean it'll stay that way.
Over in Veneta, we just experienced a 65-acre fire, the Lettsome Mountain fire, and again, the weather helped a lot in putting that fire out. However, prior to the rain, we had dry weather. We hadn't had rain in maybe about a week or two, and from there, a fire was able to spark. So it just goes to show how quickly things can dry out.
One thing different ODF is really taking advantage of this year is mutual aid agreements, partnerships to send their wildland firefighters internationally for major fires, but also them sending firefighters in return.
I think the biggest takeaway with these relationships is that, fire is a family, and no matter state lines or borders, we're here to help people because we all understand how devastating it can be.
No matter the devastation, how hot or how big the fire, life will always come back, and sometimes bigger and stronger than ever.
As you can see, this brush right here has some burn scar on it. It's kind of charred from the fire last year, but at the same time, you can see the regrowth that's happening. Just going to show how, Ecosystems can bounce back after a fire. It might take a while, but it does happen.
Dry lightning, a lot of us love it, and we love to hear it, especially the dramatic sounds in the summer months. But the beautiful light show of a thunderstorm can almost cause particularly hazardous wildfire conditions for some. Cameron's here to look at some of the science behind the phenomena.
One of the most common causes of natural wildfires in the Pacific Northwest is dry lightning. Now, what does that mean and how does it happen? Well, rising motions in the atmosphere produce clouds. And clouds, when they get tall enough and wet enough, they turn into rainfall. Those are rain clouds. If they get even taller than that and the updrafts are strong enough, then you can generate a charge inside the cloud and that gets released as lightning. Now there's cloud-to-cloud strikes and cloud-to-ground strikes. Cloud-to-ground strikes are fine as long as the surface that those lightning strikes are hitting is wet. But during the summer months, we end up with extended periods of warm and dry conditions, and that builds up a dry zone between those clouds and down towards the surface. And any of the rainfall that moves through that dry zone, well, it can evaporate. So sometimes you end up with situations where none of that rainfall hits the ground at all, and now you have lightning strikes hitting the dry ground. And of course, we know that does not bode well for wildfires. Like I said, it's one of the most common of the ignition sources here in Western Oregon.
Still ahead tonight on this special edition of KZI 9 News. It's been nearly 4 years since the holiday farm fire wreaked havoc on the McKenzie River Valley. And coming up on this special edition of KZI 9, how community members are moving forward while not forgetting what happened.
The Fire Watch forecast is sponsored by Keep Oregon Green.
I'm Natalie Weber with ODF. Have a fireplace to clean out from this winter? Don't let those leftover ashes and coals spark the next wildfire. Believe it or not, it happens. Shovel them into a metal bucket and drown them in water, or dispose of them in an area clear of vegetation and spray them down with a hose. Check for heat with the back of your hand and repeat the process until it's completely cool. By following these tips, you could be preventing a wildfire this spring. This message brought to you by Keep Oregon Green.
Did you know Oregon's sustainably grown and harvested forests absorb and store a lot of carbon? In fact, half the dry weight of wood is carbon. That's why our environment benefits when we build with wood, instead of more energy-intensive building materials. Actively managing Oregon's forests can help achieve healthier forests, more sustainable buildings, and less carbon in the atmosphere for a cooler planet. Brought to you by the American Forest Resource Council. For more information, visit amforest.org.
Your best days of the year start here at Kubota Orange Days. It's the year's biggest selection of Kubota tractors, zero-turn mowers, and utility vehicles, including the #1 selling compact tractor in the USA. Plus, get 0 down and 0% APR for 84 months or up to $2,800 off select Kubota tractors. Orange goes all day. Sales ending soon. Visit your local dealer today.
Find a Kubota dealer near you at gokubota.com.
One scratch it, please. Playing the Oregon Lottery supports rising with the sun in our state parks. Or staying out late with the stars. Because dollars from Oregon Lottery play go towards things that support more recreation, like accessibility and maintenance. Whether that involves stopping for lunch or catching it. The Oregon Lottery. Together, we do good things. Lottery games are based on chance and should be played for entertainment only.
It's been 4 years, but you can still see the devastation everywhere you look from the 2020 Labor Day wildfires.
But there's also been a lot of growth and rebuilding since the holiday farm fire. KZI 9 News reporter Aaron Ariano takes us back to the McKenzie community for an update on the recovery and how they're moving forward.
This big sign right here at the McKenzie River Community Track and Field was installed after the 2020 holiday farm fire, and it looks back at a time where this entire area was once ravaged by flames. But now some people here say they're ready to take that step forward while also ready to take on any future natural disasters. The track will soon be symbolizing something itself, a step forward, as they try to bring back a popular community event, the Mackenzie River Chainsaw and Arts Festival. It's returning this summer for the first time since it was put on pause by the COVID pandemic and the 2020 holiday farm fire. Peggy Pantel, one of the volunteer organizers of the festival, says her home was the only one standing in her neighborhood after the fire.
All the houses around me burned down, and I live down here on the highway. A lot of my friends, their homes burned down and they haven't come back.
Jess Boykin, an Iraq war veteran and firefighter for the Upper Mackenzie Rural Fire District, was one of many who lost their homes.
It feels like it was yesterday, but yet a lifetime ago. I joined the military thinking that having war under my belt, going to Iraq, was going to help me with a lot of, because I'm an EMT also, we deal with a lot up here. But going to war, you got to come home. This was our home. That makes a huge difference. I know it was a once-in-a-lifetime storm, but it was still our home where we were supposed to feel safe.
Jess is still a firefighter, but she also runs a coffee cart, which survived the fire. She plans to vendor at the Chainsaw and Arts Festival this August, something she says the community desperately needs.
We'll never have our normal back, but I know that we can strive for a new, better normal, and I think this is one of the first steps I'm seeing towards getting back to who we were as a community.
It will be held here at the Mackenzie River Community Track, which at one point during the fire was a temporary evacuation spot. And since then, the Mackenzie Community Track and Field Board is working with Lane County officials to designate it an official evacuation zone or fire camp going forward. Another sign of progress, the newly opened Station Number 2 of the Upper Mackenzie Rural Fire Protection District, built just feet away from the old station that burnt down.
The building we had prior to the fire was really just a garage to house the trucks and equipment. There was not like a fire station.
But the new station, equipped with a kitchen, day room, and offices, is also designed to be extremely fire resistant.
You know, people have to get along and work together. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I think to some extent that's exactly what you start to see, people that are rising above.
And it's not the only structure rebuilt over the past several years, as more homes continue with their rebuilding process here along the Mackenzie River. Even as the burn scars on the hills loom overhead, the people living here will be constantly reminded of what they lost, but it's not stopping them from trucking forward. Reporting in Blue River, Aaron Ariano, KEZI 9 News.
Still ahead on tonight, this special edition of KEZI 9 News, our official Stormtracker 9 fire season outlook for Oregon and the entire Northwest. You don't want to miss it.
Sims Medicare is a proud partner of Oregon Athletics.
To succeed as a multi-sport college athlete, you need to have a plan and stick to it.
But in the world of Medicare, sticking to the same plan could cost you.
Go to turnin65withscott.com today.
100% throwbacks. 99.1. This is your station. So come on, let's go. Playing your favorite throwbacks.
Turn it up. Turn it up.
99.1, the beat of Eugene.
Don't miss the 24th Annual Oregon Divisional Chainsaw Carving Championship. Thursday through Sunday, Father's Day weekend in Reedsport. Come watch carvers from all over the world with daily auctions, vendors, and family fun. For more information, visit OregonCCC.com.
Be brave enough to go over the edge. A fundraiser for the adventurous to support children in foster care. Challenge your colleagues. Nominate a neighbor. Register to Rappel and start peer-to-peer fundraising today. Learn more at casa-lane.org.
Hi, I'm Catherine Forner, and we love our own backyard so much, we built all of this. And we get everything we need from PAR, with Shauna's help.
Everything from design to delivery.
PAR, go where the builders go.
What are you gonna build?
Schlesinger and Villa. Oh, I don't know how to spell Schlesinger and Villeneuve. Schlesinger and Villeneuve. I know. LetUsFightForYou.com.
I'm Scott Sims. I've spent years learning the ins and outs of Medicare insurance. Let me help you find the strongest plan and protection for your future.
Go to turnin65withscott.com today.
Sims Medicare is a proud partner of Oregon Athletics.
This fire season could be a lot later and different than years past. And we'll get to that in our fire season outlook in just a minute. But first, we need to understand how wildfires work and how that relates to weather. Here's Cameron to explain.
Let's talk about the dynamics of wildfires, how they happen, and what makes them spread and become so dangerous. The first thing you need to consider is wildfire weather, and that's going to be hot, dry, and windy. Hot, well, that adds to low humidity, which makes it dry, and dry makes vegetation dry, which acts as the fuel to start that wildfire and keep it burning. That is what's burning in the first place. Now, wind has its own little niche in this entire operation, and that's going to be both spreading out wildfires and giving them more oxygen. And that gets into the rest of the components here. So oxygen, like I just said, this is a burning reaction, so you need to continuously feed oxygen into the fire to keep it burning, otherwise it'll choke out. Fuel, that's going to be the dry vegetation, and that comes in all different shapes and sizes. You can have very small fuels, which are dry grasses and things like that, or huge fuels like the dry trees we see behind me. A heat source, now that can be anything from a cigarette butt to some sparks off the back of a vehicle, or even a lightning strike. And speaking of a lightning strike, our example today starts with that. You can see we've got our first ignition started there in some of those dry grasses, and then there's a little bit of a push. Now that push is happening because of the winds, and that's going to help to transport what are called firebrands, which are essentially just little burning embers all over into these neighboring trees. Trees have a particularly dangerous way of spreading called torching, which is when you have a firebrand land somewhere close to the bottom, it burns up the tree and then around the entire canopy, which is what we're seeing here. And if you have multiple ignition sources, like all those other lightning strikes, it really spreads this around because it happens in multiple areas, and then you have a gigantic fire complex that happens after. Now, if you are near an area where there could be a wildfire, you got to be ready to listen to your local fire authority. They'll tell you if and when you need to evacuate, and if it's time for that evacuation, it helps to be ready beforehand. Get everything that you could need for evacuation and put it into your vehicle because you might not be able to come back.
That was some really good information right there. I appreciate that. Well, we're here at the end for our fire season forecast, and this year, as we've kind of been talking about, is a little bit different out there. We don't have drought here across Oregon.
Yeah, it's a little bit closer to a more typical fire season as opposed to the really dry ones we've seen for a while here.
Yeah, so taking a look at the drought monitor, you can see where the worst conditions are, and that's across portions of central and western Washington. And if you remember this time last year, a lot of this severe drought was located right across western Oregon. And this plays a big factor into fire season because of how dry the vegetation is, but it's also snowpack, right, Cameron?
Yeah, once again, we're actually looking typical here for today, or for the current snowpack going into this fire season. And you can see actually 146% there out over the Willamette Basin. It's a lot better than we saw last year, but again, that kind of thing can change really at an instant. Snowpack's the only one that comes up and is more of antecedent conditions, which means before.
Yeah, exactly. And reiterating things, this was kind of like a few weeks ago, but you can kind of see where drought conditions are, where the snowpack is the worst, and that's going to be areas of western Washington. But even though we're not kind of located in western Washington, we can still see these conditions here, right, Cameron?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, we can have changes happen really instantaneously that can really make things a lot worse. We're looking at east winds right now, and we know those make things a lot warmer and drier. So if we have a couple days of those sitting around, we could really take a big left turn, even though things look okay right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big thing here is even though conditions are good right now, they can change in an instant, and all we need is one big heat wave. So these are the areas where we are anticipating the worst conditions this season. The shade of red is the worst. That's where we're expecting some of the biggest wildfires, and kind of earlier in the season, you can see those drought areas, the snowpack areas, western Washington and into BC, and it's a little bit different down towards Oregon. Can you explain that?
Yeah, just like you were saying. So in zone 1, we've got all of those previous conditions we were talking about together leading to that particularly dangerous area. But zone 2 is a little different because it's more so just dominated by poor snowpack, which means things are a little drier there than you'd like for them to be. But again, just reiterating, it is a little bit more of a typical season than we would normally expect. So it's not so bad.
Yeah, so the worst conditions, again, we still are expecting up towards BC and Washington, and we're going to be watching that closely. But even here closer to home, even though we're not in the area to watch, we still need to watch this season. So kind of finalizing things, we are expecting a near normal but late season fires, even here across Western Oregon. We've had the snowpack, we've had the rain this season, so we're kind of anticipating maybe a late August, September timeframe. But again, kind of reiterating, we have those trouble spots, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got Washington, especially up all over Washington, then towards Eastern Oregon, especially southeastern Oregon. And even though those are the two worst areas, no matter where you're at, it can really take a bad turn pretty quickly if things just don't go the way we want them to.
Exactly, and we've kind of been talking about this. Like, even though conditions were great this season, it only takes one spark and it can really blow up in a situation. So we need to watch this closely, be mindful as we're kind of approaching these summer months. Just be cautious of those tow chains, kind of where your campfire is. Make sure to put it out and make sure it's cold to touch. I know we kind of repeat this, but so the big story again, Cameron, is even though we have great conditions right now, that doesn't always mean the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got to be as safe as possible out there. We talked about those different ignition sources. So just think twice around some heat. But anyway, that does it for our special edition of KEZI 9 News. And we want to thank you for joining us this season.
And before we go, remember, humans are the #1 cause of wildfires, and it only takes one spark. So be smart, and only you can prevent wildfires. We'll see you at 6:30.
The Fire Watch forecast is sponsored